Berlin, 1944. The once mighty police president of Berlin, Wolf-Heinrich Graf von Helldorff, stands in the heart of Plötzensee Prison, not as a man of power, but as a condemned traitor. Around him hang the broken bodies of men he once called allies. Their final screams still echo. His executioners make him watch as one by one, the conspirators of the failed 20th of July plot are hanged like meat, slowly and cruelly, by piano wire. The message is clear: no mercy, no dignity. Only days before, Helldorff had worn the uniform of authority, serving the very regime that now exacts its vengeance. But his secret participation in the attempt to assassinate Adolf Hitler has turned him from enforcer to enemy. In this chilling account, we unravel how Berlin's top cop became a symbol of betrayal, and why Hitler insisted he witness the horrors before facing his own end. Wolf-Heinrich Graf von Helldorff was not always a man of contradictions. Born in 1896 into Prussian nobility, he epitomized the conservative, aristocratic military elite that shaped Germany's destiny in the early 20th century. A decorated World War I officer, Helldorff gravitated toward radical politics after the war, joining the Freikorps and eventually the Nazi Party. His charisma and violent anti-communist fervor made him a natural fit for the rising Sturmabteilung, the Nazi paramilitary force. By the early 1930s, Helldorff had established himself as a loyal servant of the Third Reich. In 1935, he was appointed police president of Potsdam, and shortly after, of Berlin, an influential post that gave him control over the city's law enforcement and intelligence networks. He worked closely with the Gestapo and SS, playing a role in the persecution of Jews and political dissidents. Yet beneath his devotion to the regime, doubt simmered. Disillusioned by Hitler's tyranny and Germany's spiraling war fortunes, Helldorff began to see the Nazi future as a dead end. It was this hidden dissent, unthinkable for someone of his stature, that would ultimately lead him to the gallows, a turn of fate both tragic and symbolic. The 20th of July plot, also known as Operation Valkyrie, was the most audacious internal attempt to assassinate Adolf Hitler and dismantle the Nazi regime from within. Orchestrated by senior military officers and conservative politicians, the plan aimed to kill Hitler with a bomb during a briefing at the Wolf's Lair, and then use the reserve army to seize control of Berlin and key government structures. Success would end a war Germany was clearly losing, and possibly save what remained of the nation's honor. Helldorff's involvement in the plot was as unlikely as it was critical. As Berlin's police president, he controlled thousands of officers and had direct influence over the capital's stability. He was trusted by the regime, yet he secretly met with key conspirators like Klaus von Stauffenberg and Ludwig Beck. His task: neutralize pro-Nazi elements in Berlin and ensure the smooth takeover of the city once Hitler was dead. But when the bomb failed to kill Hitler on July 20th, 1944, the operation unraveled in hours. Helldorff did not act decisively, perhaps hesitating, perhaps confused by conflicting reports. Within days, the Gestapo began rounding up plotters. His betrayal was discovered quickly. Despite his status, there would be no second chances. He had chosen the losing side, and Hitler wanted revenge. Wolf-Heinrich von Helldorff was arrested on July 25, 1944, just 5 days after the failed assassination attempt. His capture marked a personal triumph for Heinrich Himmler and the Gestapo, who were determined to root out every thread of the conspiracy. For Helldorff, it was the beginning of a rapid descent into Nazi judicial hell. He was brought before the Volksgerichtshof, the People's Court, presided over by the infamous Roland Freisler. Known for his theatrical rage and mockery, Freisler turned the courtroom into a propaganda stage, where verdicts were preordained and trials were mere formalities. Helldorff, once feared in Berlin's political circles, now stood humiliated and broken under Freisler's verbal abuse. His high rank, once a shield, now marked him for harsher punishment. During the trial, Freisler accused Helldorff of treason against the Führer, cowardice, and disgraceful betrayal. Evidence was secondary. What mattered was the optics of a Nazi official turning against Hitler. There was no defense, only a sentence. On August 15, 1944, he was condemned to death. Yet even this punishment wasn't enough. Hitler demanded that Helldorff be made to suffer. The sentence included a cruel twist. He was to be forced to witness the execution of fellow conspirators before his own death. This was not just retribution. It was a deliberate act of psychological torture intended to crush any remnants of resistance within the Nazi ranks. In the dark chambers of Plötzensee Prison, cruelty took on a theatrical form. Adolf Hitler, enraged by the betrayal from within, ordered that certain conspirators of the 20th of July plot suffer not only death, but also despair. Among those singled out was Wolf-Heinrich von Helldorff, whose betrayal was seen as especially disgraceful, given his high position in the regime. The directive: he must witness the execution of his comrades before meeting his own fate. What followed was a macabre spectacle. Inside the prison's execution hall, iron meat hooks were mounted on the wall. The method chosen was deliberate: hanging by piano wire. Victims were stripped, hoisted slowly by pulleys, and left to die in prolonged agony. Some took minutes to die, choking and flailing in a scene of horror. Nazi officials, including Goebbels and other elites, were given filmed copies of these executions as a warning. Helldorff, forced to stand among the bodies of his fellow plotters, had to watch each hanging in full. Men he had conspired with, like General Friedrich Olbricht and Klaus von Stauffenberg, were let in, eyes steeled or resigned. They were executed one by one. Helldorff's face, it's said, was etched with a mix of dread and guilt. Some accounts claim he wept. Others suggest he tried to hold his posture until the end. This sadistic choreography of death was not justice. It was psychological warfare. The aim was to crush the human spirit, to humiliate traitors in their final moments, and to send a grotesque warning to anyone still considering resistance. Helldorff's final hours were not just about death. They were about domination, shame, and the collapse of a man who once held Berlin in his grip. After witnessing the executions of his fellow conspirators, Wolf-Heinrich von Helldorff was finally led to the gallows on August 15, 1944. There was no reprieve, no final words recorded. He was hanged by the same method as the others, stripped of dignity, suspended by piano wire, and left to die slowly. His body was discarded like those before him, another notch in Hitler's campaign of terror. Unlike some conspirators, whose names would later be honored in memorials and history books, Helldorff's legacy remains complex. Though he ultimately stood against Hitler, his earlier complicity in enforcing Nazi policies, particularly in suppressing dissent and facilitating anti-Semitic persecution, made him a controversial figure. He was both executioner and victim. Plötzensee Prison became a symbol of Nazi brutality, where nearly 3,000 people were executed during the Third Reich. After the war, it was preserved as a memorial site. Helldorff's name rarely appears on plaques or monuments. He is remembered not as a hero, but as a cautionary tale, a man who served tyranny, then turned against it too late. His death marked one of the most symbolic collapses of the Nazi inner circle. A top cop of Berlin, forced to witness the fall of a rebellion he had dared to join, and then be consumed by the very machine he once controlled. The story of Wolf-Heinrich von Helldorff is not one of redemption. It is one of reckoning. As Berlin's police president, he enforced the iron grip of Nazi rule, contributing to a regime defined by oppression, violence, and fear. Yet when the tide of history began to shift, he chose to side with those who dared to resist. His late act of defiance, while courageous in its intent, could not erase years of complicity. His fate, forced to watch others die before his own execution, was engineered not only to punish, but to send a chilling message. Even insiders are not safe. Hitler's wrath was not reserved for enemies alone, but for traitors within. In this, the Nazi regime revealed its deepest insecurity, paranoia masked by spectacle. What do we make of a man like Helldorff? Was he a villain who tried too late to be a hero, or a man who woke up just in time to die for a better cause? His life forces us to confront difficult truths about morality under dictatorship, the weight of delayed conscience, and the cost of action versus inaction. Today, as authoritarianism rises in new forms around the world, Helldorff's downfall serves as a grim reminder. Power built on fear will devour even its most loyal servants. The question left hanging, like the men in Plötzensee, is this: when the time comes to choose between conscience and comfort, how late is too late to do the right thing?